What is your profession?
I'm a computer programmer.
Mr. Curtis, are there programs that can be used to secretly fix elections?
Yes.
How do you know that to be the case?
Because in October of 2000, I wrote a prototype for President Congressman Tom Feeney at the company I worked for in Oviedo, Florida, that did just that.
It would rig an election?
How easy is it to fix an election, to change the result of the vote in the world's most free democracy? Hello and welcome. There are many Americans who think the elections in 2000 and 2004 were stolen, and they fear it could happen again next week when Barack Obama goes up against John McCain. Just how electronic voting in the US might have been dramatically fixed is the subject of an intense documentary featuring the man who says he wrote the software to rig the results. He believes the bizarre tale involves corruption, intimidation, espionage, and even staged killings. In the film Murder, Spies and Voting Lies, the Clint Curtis story, the outcome of the last US vote is called very much into question. The results in specific parts of the country are examined in the light of potential fixing, and the true democracy of the American elections are put into doubt. On today's show, we ask, how secure, free and fair are US elections, and who's in a position to rig them? Don't forget, you can take part in the program, and you can also go to www.livestation.com after you've downloaded the software, enter the chat room to pose your questions and comments. Well, on today's show, we're looking at the controversy surrounding the vote. We have the main subject of the documentary, Murder, Spies and Voting Lies. Clint Curtis, a software developer who says he found himself caught in a dramatic story of intrigue and had to blow the whistle on what was going on. He joins us from Florida. With us from Los Angeles is the main interviewer and narrator of the documentary, Brad Friedman, who edits bradblog.com and has been closely following the issue of possible election rigging. Gentlemen, I thank you both for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Riz.
Right, well, Clint Curtis, starting with you, do you think this election coming up in a week's time is going to be free and fair?
Absolutely not. There is no indication that we've made any great strides forward. There's still over 300 electoral votes in states that cannot be verified. So unless Obama can pull off 10% victory in particular states, the election could easily be fixed.
Now, Brad Friedman, what are you expecting to happen? In what way might the election be twisted to benefit one party or the other, and what signs have you seen so far?
Well, yeah, it's already being twisted in that regard on a number of fronts. On one level, there is an extraordinary amount of voter roll purging going on. In other words, people being illegally moved from the registration rolls so that they'll never be able to vote at all, most likely. And then secondly, one of the other problems that we're seeing quite a bit of right now is, again, these touchscreen voting machines that are used in about 1/3 of the, will be used by about 1/3 of the voters this year. And in state after state, county after county right now, we're seeing people trying to vote on these machines and their votes being flipped from Democratic, usually from Democratic to Republican. And nothing is being done about it. And to underscore what Clint said, those voters voting on those touchscreen machines, it is strictly impossible to verify that any vote ever cast on one of those machines has been recorded as per the accurately as per the voter's intent. It's a scandal, frankly, that we're still using those machines in 2008, now knowing what we know about them.
Well, if I could ask you, Clint, to answer an email we had from Italy, Stefano Bastiani wrote in advance of the show and said, Al Gore was elected president in 2000. Everyone knows it, but no one spoke up, and now the world has been destroyed. Civilized countries should elect a president to send to the USA. Do you believe that, as many people do, that the election was stolen in 2000 and 2004?
Well, I think they're just learning about it. A lot of people still don't know all the problems with the 2000 election. They felt something was wrong, and it was just that feeling you get. It wasn't actually, we have the evidence. In 2000, the program I wrote couldn't have been used. Basically what they did there was they just didn't count the votes correctly, or just stopped counting altogether in Bush v. Gore. But after 2002 and the advent of this electronic touchscreen machine, all bets are off. The votes never have matched anywhere exit polling when they're done on the touchscreen machines. They do match when they're done on paper. That is kind of a red herring that there is a problem and it needs to be fixed.
Now, Clint, knowing about this story and watching the documentary, the first question that came to my mind was, what made you want to write a program that would flip the vote in the first place?
Well, I'm a programmer, and at the time I was a Republican. The person who asked me, Tom Feeney, was Speaker of the House. He was a Republican. I assumed that the Democrats were plotting some sort of a vote flipping software, and he was just trying to proactively attack it. And so when I wrote the program, I also wrote steps on how you would actually make sure that this program could not be used, which is simply you make it print out a paper ballot, you count the paper ballot as a ballot of record, and you audit that ballot at the end, at least 10% of it, so that there's no way that what goes on the machine can affect the final result. But what essentially happened was they made the software secret, they made it so there was no record, and now the only recorded fact is inside the machine that no one can actually see. So they actually used what I told them to not do and actually put it into law as an ability to flip an election. And essentially that's what we have right now.
I should point out we did try to contact Tom Feeney's office but got no reply from his office. I must ask Brad Friedman, in your documentary Murder, Spies and Voting Lies, you highlight a number of areas of concern from 2004, and one of them is Gahanna, the suburb of Columbus in Ohio, where the documentary says only 638 voters cast ballots, but George W. Bush ended up with 4,258 votes, though in reality only got 365. When you saw such massive discrepancies between the polls that were taking place and the results that were coming up, and where electronic votes were very different from the paper ballots, I mean, didn't this raise some alarm bells for people as well?
Well, it certainly raised them for me. And by the way, I want to be clear, the film is actually, the filmmaker is Patty Sheriff. Right. I narrated, and it's based on my work in breaking the story and reporting it, for the last 4 years. But I want to give credit where it's due there. Yeah, it certainly raised alarm bells for me when I saw what happened in that one precinct in Ohio. Unfortunately, we saw problems like that happening all over Ohio in 2004, and frankly all over the country. It raised my alarm bells. Problem was, apparently it didn't raise John Kerry's alarm bells or the corporate mainstream media like Washington Post, New York Times, AP, who all regarded what happened in 2004, and those of us who had concerns about it and hard evidence that there were some serious irregularities, they regarded us as conspiracy theorists, and and it didn't make sense because we had hard information. They refused to investigate it. And by and large, it seems that was because they were following the instructions of John Kerry, who he didn't challenge it. This is what journalists have told me. John Kerry didn't challenge it, so he had the most to lose, so why should we bother to investigate it? And I've had to say time and time again, it wasn't John Kerry's election to lose, it was the American people's, and that's what the Fourth Estate, the media in America, is supposed to be doing, but unfortunately, they're not doing their job. So folks like myself and Clint have had to sort of step up and do it for them.
Brad, how do you judge what the media is doing right now, then, knowing what's happened in the past, seeing this information put before them? How are they handling this this election?
Yeah, not much better. As you see, there's been this this phony scam put forward by Republicans about this massive voter fraud being committed by a group named Acorn that's related to the Democrats somewhat. Fact is, there is no voter fraud going on. The corporate media has been happy to just forward these reports from these Republicans without any actual evidence, and at the same time, these massive reports of illegal voter purging, of votes flipping, serious concerns about election fraud have been all but ignored by most of the corporate media. So I don't think they've learned too much, unfortunately, since 2004.
Just before I get back to Clint, that suggests, Brad, that you're thinking the vote rigging always benefits the Republicans?
Well,
Sorry, this is for Brad, and I'll get to you in a second, Clint.
Well, and Clint's right. Historically, it has, and the reports that we're seeing, for example, of votes flipping on touchscreen machines, which I believe is likely more due to error than rigging. Nonetheless, it always seems to benefit the Republicans. So, yeah, that seems to be going on time and time again. And I promise you, had it been the other way around and had it been benefiting the Democrats, I suspect the corporate mainstream media would have been all over these problems, and those machines would have been removed from so far the 5 different states where we've had reports of votes flipping that way.
Now, Clint, what made you want to blow the whistle and say what was going on? Especially, I mean, the title of the documentary includes the words murder, and I know watching it that there's been a lot of very suspect activity around the whole cover-up as you see it.
Well, essentially when I wrote it, and I handed it over to the owner. I thought I was preventing vote fraud, or that was the request, is what I assumed it would be. And she said, no, this is basically for flipping votes in South Florida. So at that point, I just thought they were a little crazy, because essentially what you would have to do in order for this to work is you would have to get a manufacturer that's basically embedded with one party, and the other party is going to accept what their total is without any verification, let them put in software they can inspect, let them provide totals that they can never verify, and it just didn't make any sense. I didn't see any way possible that they could actually do what they did. But essentially, as we know, that's what happened. And once that happened, it's my duty to come forward and tell the truth. I mean, either we have a democracy or we're going to be moving into this Stalinistic, I'll tell you who wins and you'll accept it.
All right, well, let's take a couple of quick calls back to back. We have Eid in Norway with a question first. Go ahead, Eid.
Yes, actually, I would like to ask you, as you said that the previous elections, 2000 and 2004, there was illegal, I mean, there is unfair things there. So now this election, which is coming on November, now we are ahead. How do you think then things could be changed? Previous machines was unfair, and now you see people that are still thinking about maybe the previous thing can happen. What are you suggesting that can be done now?
We'll get into that in a second. Let's get Juliana in from Paris quickly as well. Juliana, go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Khan.
Good evening. Thanks for being with us again.
Thank you. I just want to ask, what is the international community's responsibility in all this? Because we've seen the Bush administration in the past condemn African leaders like the examples of Kenya and Zimbabwe to make sure and ensure that elections are free and fair. They preach water and drink wine because they actually advocate for democracy when they don't practice it themselves. It's such big hypocrisy we're seeing here. So what is the international community going to do to make sure that if the Democrats win, actually they get into the White House, because the Republicans will rig these elections?
What I'll do is I'm going to take a very short break here, but we'll go back to both your question and Eid's question when we get back from this short break. So stay with us.